Hello, this is Laptop Radio. Today's topic is labor abuse in startups, and I have stories with a few people about employment and labor abuse. Hey, Chad.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I would always like to begin our talk with a little bit about you and what's your story.
I'm kind of a jack of all trades type of guy. I've done a lot of different things over my time, from oil and gas to cryptocurrencies to different technologies. I got involved in cryptocurrencies in 2011, so I'm kind of an old school OG type guy on that. And I started with a few miners in my house, and just kind of built from there and fell in love with kind of blockchain technology, Bitcoin. I am not a Bitcoin maximalist. But uh, I'm a big fan of altcoins. And I kind of just, the story from there is just kind of, I left oil and gas, shifted over into blockchain full time, actually just a little over about a year and a half ago. And I was doing consulting on the side as well, but I finally just kind of took the plunge, and my story led me to a company that had big expectations, the name, and they burned a lot of my road stake up, and I learned a lot of lessons from that.
Awesome. And in your situation of labor abuse, what is the context?
Yeah, so in the context of it all, I think ultimately what truly happened was kind of the same old story, right? It's you're working for someone expecting something, and I was expecting pay, I was expecting back pay. I shifted from one company to another, and ultimately it was always delayed, right? It was always kind of, oh well, the money's coming, the money's coming. I think in startups we hear this a lot. We hear that, oh, the money's coming, and things are tight. There's no doubt. I mean, every startup, they want to run lean, and that's the truth. And they want to not pay people if they don't have to. But the reality is, it causes a problem in the ecosystem where people aren't valued for what they truly bring to the table. And I don't know how we change that as a culture. I don't know if we even can, but I think ultimately, in my context, it was the realization that months had gone by and nothing was changing. And so I said, okay, this obviously, I'm not getting paid, and neither are a lot of other people. So I need to instead to make the ball move forward.
Were you an independent contractor, employee,
Yeah,
advisor,
yeah.
consultant?
So with that, I was working for another blockchain company,
Mhm.
and we had kind of partnered with. What had happened was, when we had partnered with them, I was picked up pretty quickly from them, and they said, "Hey, man, you obviously are great at operations. You're great at this. You're great at that." And I was coming on almost full time. What was happening is I was winding down my work with the previous company and moving into kind of a larger role. I was spending a lot of time in the evenings. I was on midnight calls because they are based out of India, portion of their team. And And what was happening was, I was more than an advisor. It was actually kind of a humbling experience. You have to protect your downside no matter what. And even though I tell people that every single time, on even when I was consulting with people on cryptocurrencies, it was always protecting your downside. And if it was too risky, not to get involved. And here I was doing exactly what I told people not to do, and was not protecting my downside. I didn't have an agreement in place. I didn't have a number of things that I should have had in place to make something, you know, uh, locked down legally. And that was partially my fault. But it was always the promise. There were handshakes, there were meetings, there were complete promises. There was another team member of mine on the old business. They had moved over as well with the same promises, and so there was a lot of just false promises across the board. So I was an advisor, I was also an employee, and I was also supposed to receive quite a bit of their shares.
Did you, is anything in writing?
So there's a lot of emails, but what was interesting about how worked is he's a very, very nice individual, and I don't think that he ever meant it out of bad spirit. I think what happens when people are starting up is they don't, sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and sometimes they don't realize that yes, you have to pay people or get some sort of contract in place to be able to have some sort of foundation for that person.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, there was a lot of talk. There was a lot of emails that went back and forth that show that I obviously was working. Matter of fact, I think I still probably have an email tied to them that I can jump in and send emails if I want. It's almost ridiculous how poor they thought this out. Now, I was supposed to come on as a COO, roughly, basically in operations for the U.S. and North America, and to do that, one thing I kept telling and his executive team, which I was part of to some extent, was, hey, we need contracts for the safety of the company, right? This is saving you guys. And the reality is, every time I brought this up, I was told one thing: Chad, why are we wasting time on this? We need to move the ball forward. We need to bring in. They were trying to raise $1 billion to invest in other companies. Myself and another gentleman, we both vetted over 200 companies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we went through a lot of different startups. We talked to a lot of great startups. And even they were kind of put on back burner while we did the quote unquote raise, right? So everything was always pushed back. And even when we wanted to get a contract in place, I produced 9 contracts over the course of 3 weeks.
Wow.
And every time I sat down with these contracts, I'd give options too. Some were very, very, very lucrative for them, and some were very lucrative for me. And ultimately, every single time I did, the answer would be, let's sign it tomorrow. Today I'm busy, right? And that was always kind of the game. It was always kind of pushing the ball to the next day. And then, he would leave and go to New York, and so nothing would happen. And sooner or later, you start realizing, unfortunately, sometimes a little later than you should, because you're not trusting your instincts and trusting your gut. And that's kind of how that plays
How
out.
long were you there?
So I was there loosely from January to July. I really started helping them July, right around May, early May, and that was when the idea was I was going to basically transfer over to them full time for my other job, and that was fine. My boss at the other business, he was fine with it. We had a partnership. He thought everything was going to be fine. Otherwise, I don't think he would have been having. We were actually working with the other company. We were working with to help benefit them, because it would also ultimately benefit our partnership. And so there was a lot of burned steak and money spent from that previous company for us to work, which was never. I mean, they never paid any of that back, of course.
What do you do about the situation?
Yeah, so when I tell people to protect their downside, and I think that's always the big key, is you have to actively string it. Okay? And I say that because I think a lot of times we get in these modes, whether it's a startup or whether it's our business, whether it's our own, and we kind of, there's two sides of this. There's one side that is like, you're excited, this is going to be the big deal. You're gonna help drive this forward, right?
Yep.
And the other side is, you still have to be able to think outside that box. You still have to stop drinking the Kool-Aid and drink a little bit of water and maybe come down off that high a little bit to get that bird's eye overview of everything. I think that's a big key. And what was happening is, Paul was a wonderfully nice man. There was no doubt about it. And whether it was his own misjudgment of what he really, wanted out of people, or just maybe that's really what he wanted, was free work. I don't know. In that situation, you have to read kind of the tea leaves. You always have to be, when you have a gut instinct, I'm a big believer in believing in my gut. And
Hmm.
I had that multiple times, and I didn't listen to it because I was drinking the Kool-Aid. Because it was almost too good to be true. And that's the other side is when things seem too good to be true, you better believe they're too good to be true, right? Um, Almost every single time.
So let's talk about resolution. You know, so did you bring it up to the person, and what do you do about, you know, the situation? Like, did you bring him to court? You know, what happened there?
Yeah, so I think in most situations, I don't think you really the first step is to reach out to the person and explain to them. Like, and I this is a hard step for a lot of people. Some people worry that they're going to, get let go. Okay, but if you're not getting paid, it doesn't matter, right? And I think it's always the worry of uh, of what the unknown is. You're jumping into a pitch blackness underneath you when you do something like that. You don't know, it's an unknown, right? So when you go and speak to someone and they're the CEO of a company that you're working with, whether you're loosely interning for free or not, the worry is that they're going to just dismiss you and say we don't need you anymore. And I know it's happened plenty of times in the startup world, but I think ultimately what I did was I approached it, and I approached it from multiple fronts. So I have a history of strategy. I've been a strategist, a political strategist years and years ago. So I have a little bit of I have a skill set that's very, very unique for these types of situations. So I went at it multiple routes. So one, I went head on, and then the other route was I went through the company I was previously working with,
Hmm.
and and I approached in both methods using one my previous business and mentor. He came on board and he helped kind of drive that conversation forward. But what was happening was even when he was driving that conversation forward, we would start seeing nothing was happening. It was simply, oh, well, let's handle it next week. This week we have X, Y, and Z to handle.
Wow. So were you ever gotten paid?
I was never paid. No. Yeah, I was never paid.
So you didn't pursue any legal action against them?
Um, I have not at this time. I think legal action, and you'd asked, what do you do? First step I think is reaching out to the person
Mhm.
directly and saying, hey, this is what's expected. And I did that multiple times. I did that at least 6 times. Okay, obviously it didn't work, and I should have realized that after the third time or the second time. But I was really applying a different method of effort that I've never applied before. And then the next step, I truly think, is not necessarily going directly to a legal framework and going to court. I think the next step is you extricating yourself from that situation. I think this is good. Now, if it's a situation where there's contracts and that gets a little sticky, I think that if there is a contract in place, I think that yes, you probably do need to reach out and find legal help and get that moving forward. That can cost anywhere from $250 to $1,000 just to get that ball moving forward. But I do think that's a great avenue for certain people that feel like they're stuck. So some people, I wasn't stuck. For me, I'm going to go find something the next day. It's not a big deal. I mean, if I have to do anything, I'll do it. I just don't like to be in those situations where you feel like there's no way out. And that's what was happening. I mean, he had multiple people working for him, and he was bringing new people on and making them work for free, essentially.
Oh,
For a
wow.
Yeah, and to this day, it's continuing. I'm very
What
aware.
do you think? What is that mentality? Like, I'm just trying to, it seems like there's a belief or some kind of mentality that this person may have, and I seem there seems to be a pattern to this. You know, because if one person doesn't pay one person, the other person may not get paid. And I know in where we live in California, that doesn't may not be legal.
Hmm.
But I'm just wondering, it's just that psychology, right? Of of almost that entitlement.
Yeah, the entitlement of the work. Um, I think it's hard because there's a part of it where it's I think for some of these types of people, it is a psychosis, and they think
Mhm.
it's almost an ego. It's tough. I think it might be a little bit of ego, and it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar project. Well, you're just going to work for free because you're going to get X, Y, and Z when we actually do something, right? They're drinking their Kool-Aid way too much. And I think that is part of this. For me, in every business I've ever gotten involved in, I've always been very gracious, whoever comes on board. For me, I believe that you have to support the team in a very drastic way. Because if you can't support your team, you probably shouldn't be running a business. And I think that, I remember when I first started in the mining realm of cryptocurrencies, and a partner came on, a very good friend of mine, and he was going to be handling all of the technical expertise. Well, all he was doing was the technical expertise. He was setting up CG Miner. He was getting everything set up. I was spending all the money. I was getting everything basically ready to go. And when we came to the table and he said, well, how much are you going to offer me? I offered him 50%, and he was blown away. But for me, it makes more sense to have your partners and your team on feeling that way, right? They're getting something that's worth it for them, even if it takes a little bit away from what you might be getting. Okay, you might not make as much money. Okay, but you know what? When the team is doing well, you're going to do well, and I think you're going to do far better having a team around you that feels that way, rather than running people into the ground for free for X amount of months, or even for some people it's longer than that. So when I go back to cultural, I do think there is a cultural schism there. Here, obviously, it doesn't really, a lot of people don't get away with it because they know they're going to get sued. But in other countries, it's okay. In this case, for me, I think that to be honest, I just think he doesn't know how to run a business. I think he's oblivious of what things cost. At one point, I remember a conversation where we were talking about me coming on board as basically operations for the U.S. and operations is a role. I mean, you're talking $100 to $115,000, yearly salary, roughly, right? So, when I explained this to him, he at first, oh yeah, that's fine. We'll pay you whatever you need. Obviously, you're worth it. Okay, great. A couple weeks go by, and he goes, actually, only everybody's getting paid $3,000 per month. We know that. How do you pay your executive team $3,000 per month, and you want to onboard a bunch of people? What you're going to get is you're going to get, maybe some investors who don't really work. They're getting paid $3,000 per month. Fantastic for them. Or you're going to get very low skilled workers who don't know how to do certain processes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine for those types of people. But if you have executive people coming in who are building your business, you need to pay them out. And so when I'm trying to bookend all this with kind of the idea that I think in many of these cases, well, in this case specifically, he was unaware of what he was unaware of. Right? You take that pie, the piece of pie, and you slice two slices out of it. Right? You have one slice, what you know. You take the other small slice, it's what you don't know. The rest of that pie, 98% of it is what you don't know. And I don't think he knew what he didn't know. And he wasn't able to see it because he was drinking too much Kool-Aid at the time.
Okay, let's talk about ideals, because I think that's very important. So ideally, how would you handle the situation?
Well, it's difficult because so in my situation, I'd handled it as well as I could. I actually gave way more time to making it work than I really should have. But I think in some instances, it really depends on the situation. Like I said earlier, if you feel like you're locked in and you've spent a significant amount of time and you are owed a lot of money, I think you do need to forcibly try to earn that money back, whether that's through legal term, whether that's through the legal channels, or whether that's through, conversations. I mean, in certain states, out of all honesty, you can record conversations with one party. I'm not saying you should set anybody up. At the same time, if you are being kind of run aground and it almost feels purposeful, then you need to take the proper steps to protect yourself and protect your downside. And that's a hard thing for people to swallow sometimes, is defending yourself. A lot of people, they turn the other cheek. And I think for me, it's hard for me not to defend even other people. For me, it's one of those situations where when I see a travesty occurring, I have to step up to it and make a notation of it directly. And I'm a very upfront person, and that's kind of how I just handle everything.
Awesome. What is that one piece of advice that you have for the community?
Trust that, if you feel like there's something going on, if you feel like there's a red flag, trust that there probably is. Most people, you have a gut instinct, and if it's calling out to you that there's a problem, there probably is a problem. And find what that problem is. Stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Sit back. Look at it from a different perspective. If you have to reach out to friends and family, reach out to friends and family. Have them look at it and say, hey, what are your thoughts? And then ultimately come in with a very objective thought process, not subjective. If you use subjectiveness on a startup, it's always going to be on the side of the startup, because it could be $1 billion idea. But the stress involved with not getting paid for 6 months or whatever it is, maybe it's only 2 months. Like in my case, it was about 3 months. The stress involved with not being paid or not getting what you deserve or what you were told you were going to get is sometimes far worse for you than just walking away from it all. And that's really the only thing. And having a community where you can speak up, this is critical. So I do actually, after running into this, I have a lot of talks with a lot of people from that company that are always constantly talking to me. And I am constantly trying to help. I'm a big fan of helping people. And that's why I think even what you're doing right here with this radio show on labor abuse, this is important, because people have to understand there are people out there that have gone through this that are willing to talk to you and come up with solutions to help you out.
Yeah. There were a lot of interest from the community, and it's really exciting, but I think it's really much needed.
Oh yeah.
So I just want to thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for doing this. I think it's important, like I said, to have a gateway for people to hear, what's going on in the startup and even the blockchain world. I mean, and like I was saying earlier before we started briefly, is that, when you have small collections of people, like we do in blockchain industry, as well as even startup industry, there's a lot of people moving in and out of different startups. We have to be able to see this, and we have to be able to call out travesties that we see, things that are really happening. We have to stand up and say, hey, this cannot happen anymore, because it's damaging our reputation, one, as all startups, and two, as a blockchain industry.
Yeah, and I think it's wage thieves or time thieves, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we have time, and in a lot of instances, time is more valuable than money.
Oh, of course.
If I spent a couple months helping someone, you're robbing me of the time that I could spend elsewhere.
Yep, you could spend that. I mean, someone could spend that on a beach relaxing. They could spend it with their family, their friends. They could spend it. I mean, another job that's actually going to, really value their input. And you're right. These people are time thieves. And, at the end of the day, when you're sold a basket of goods that aren't good, they're all rotten. You just have to be able to realize that very quickly and see the signs, trust your gut, and call it out. And if nothing changes, find support wherever you can to find a solution to it.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you very soon.
Okay. Bye.